one day somebody does something unspeakable to someone else, to someone you hardly knew, and you do something about it, because you can.
This story comes to us from Fox News, where an NPR correspondent repeatedly called for the law enforcement complex in America to be destroyed, believing it to be irreparably racist and beyond any reform. Gene Demby is a correspondent who is focused on telling purportedly black truths at NPR's Culture Wing, where he espouses leftist views, including that America is a country that's built and defined by white supremacy. On his X account, formerly Twitter, where he calls himself the LeBron James of pig feet, Demby expresses his most extreme ideologies, notably that police don't prevent crime and perpetuate racist state violence. Abolition means no policing because policing is an inherently destructive force, he said. That was in June 2020. Demby made sure to point out that his perspective was more radical than activists who call for reform or to defund the police. Said reform is different from abolition because it's based on the idea that policing should exist, but simply modified with more diverse police forces, with different training, etc. But none of that interrupts the imperatives of policing, the NPR correspondent said, and that was in August of 2020 on his X post, formerly Twitter. There are people pushing for defunding because it rolls back policing, and other people pushing for defunding because that's the practical way to abolition, Demby continued. He said the movement is abolish the police, abolition. Demby said police have very little vital function in society. I kind of disagree, but I get where he's going with that. The police don't solve violent crimes effectively. They don't prevent crimes. They don't de-escalate situations. And they put people in contact with the criminal justice system for being poor. I agree with all that. They're proactive, or they're reactive, I should say. How are they helpful? What vital function do they serve besides social control, he says. And like I was saying, I clarify, they're reactive. They're not always proactive. He went on to call the American public racist. Whoa. He said every time the police have contact with black people during some bullshit traffic stop or some jumpy gentrifier calls 911, the prospect of state violence up to and including deadly force is on the table. The most direct way to keep black folks from being killed by cops is stop those unnecessary encounters. It takes off the table the bias in police imperatives among individual officers and among a racist public who use 911 like a customer service hotline. I kind of agree there. Demby responded to one user who said, "We must revoke the powers the police enjoyed. We've got to change all of the rules, all of it. From the ground up, no policing. We don't need it," he says. Demby shared his left-wing views on police during the course of his affiliation with the taxpayer-funded NPR. His first byline appeared as early as 2012. Now, Fox News Digital contacted NPR for comment about the correspondent, but did not receive a response. Demby leads NPR's Code Switch podcast team, which proclaims to be the fearless conversations about race that you've been waiting for, according to its website. Now at NPR, he publishes stories on whiteness and imagining a world without prison. Well, welcome to Snake Plissken, I guess. His views about defunding the police state are more closely aligned with white Democrats than black America, according to a Pew research. During the height of the discussion surrounding defunding the police, Pew research showed in 2021 that by and large, Democratic black Americans support increased funding for law enforcement. More so than white liberals. Only 25% of black Americans polled supported reducing funding, and 36% wanted to keep status quo for police budgets, according to that research. Very interesting. Very interesting. NPR more broadly has reportedly been struggling to connect to an audience, according to a report in the New York Times, which was causing a revenue problem. Quote, it is grappling with a declining audience and falling revenue and internal conflict about how to fix it, says Times reporter Benjamin Mullen and Jeremy Peters. Now, while most of NPR's funding comes from corporate sponsorships, according to its website, the nonprofit also benefits both directly and indirectly from federal funds. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which got a fiscal 2026 advance of $535 million in the latest government funding deal, oversees both NPR and PBS, which is the Public Broadcasting Service. PBS, I grew up on, that's the one where, here it was in California, it was Channel 28 when I was growing up. That's the one that had Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and all these other, you could get on there and you could have your own little show if you could pay, I think, or something, if I recall. But bottom line is, you know, this guy gets on there and he gives some opinions about the police, and I agree with a lot of what he's saying, by the way. Especially when he says they don't solve anything, and they don't stop crime. That's what a lot of the police officers do, is they respond to crimes. When the cops show up, the crime's already been committed. They already called 911. You know what I mean? So I've seen a lot more patrolling here in the city of Yucaipa among officers, but in the past I've seen them, midnight, 1 a.m, 4 or 5 cars parked behind a church, all just sitting there in rows. Maybe they're doing their paperwork, maybe they are working, I get it, but why not work out on the street where people commit crimes? There's an idea. No, they go hide behind a church somewhere so that they can do their paperwork and not be bothered. Well, while somebody's stealing somebody's property, or some guy's assaulting some girl, or some drunk driver's crashing into a light pole, they're hiding behind a church somewhere instead of sitting out on the street. Now, I did see one Yucaipa deputy, I forget who it was. I know his face, but I forget the name. But he was doing his paperwork on Yucaipa Boulevard. He was sitting there, and this kid comes by. Zoom! I go, ha ha! And sure enough, his lights come on. That's what we want. That's what we want, you see what I'm saying? Not responding to the DUI guy that ran into a pole, but sitting out on the street and maybe catching that guy before he does crash. I digress, I'm sorry. But that's kind of get what this guy is saying is, what do we need the police for? To take reports or whatever? This is a can of worms that I've opened, and man, we could go all day on this, and I know you don't want to go all day on this, so I won't. The bottom line is, and I want to ask all of you this, do you believe that it's okay for media organizations like NPR to get federal funding? Well, the government shouldn't be paying the media. I mean, I don't know. They're a nonprofit. I know that. But are they collecting taxpayer dollars? And should they be able to collect taxpayer dollars? Or should they come from charitable donations only? And so forth, so forth.